These are the notes for Unit 10, Day 5. We're going to do some operations with functions, and we're just going to have to get used to some of this notation, and it's not super tricky, but if you look at f plus g of x, that notation can be a little bit tricky, but all we're saying is take the function f of x and add it to g of x. And we're really just doing the same with subtraction, multiplication, and dividing, or quotient. So the only thing we need to be careful with is on subtraction and division, the order does matter. As far as multiplication and addition, that's commutative, so that doesn't necessarily matter. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a chart, we're going to look at a graph, and then we're going to look at equations, kind of the way that we've been doing the last few days. So first of all, we have f plus g, and if I use my colors again, all they're asking me to do here is find f of x at 0, right? So this is the x value I'm looking at, and f of x at that value is -2. G of x at that value right here is at 2, and they're asking me to add those two together, and -2 plus 2 is 0. So I don't know what the result's going to be when I plug it in. I just know that those are the values I'm going to get as a result. Again, we're going to look at it at 0. So number 3, it says f times g of 0. So again, I evaluate at 0 for f, that's -2, and I evaluate at 0 for g, and that's +2. We just saw that already. And they're telling me to multiply those two numbers together. So basically, it's exactly what we did for the last couple of days, except you're going to do some operation with those two numbers. And then f minus g of -1, right? So we're going to go over here to -1, right? And I'm looking at 3 and 3. And again, we're at 3 minus 3, and that just ends up being 0, right? So we're just going to perform those operations given those numbers. Now, the graph, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to locate the x value. So I have f plus g of 0. That's my first one. So I go to 0, and at 0, f of x is 0. And at 0, g of x is down here at -2. So that is 0 plus -2. So my solution there is -2. So I'm just plugging that value in and finding that answer. Now, with my quotient, we're going to go to where x is 3. So here I find 3. I go down and I find this function here. This is at -3. Sorry, that was f. And then they wanted g over x. So I go to 3, and we're up here at 7. And so I end up with 7/3. You want to simplify this or evaluate this if you can. This is the best I could do. This is just going to be 7 over 3, -7/3. And we could just leave it like that. That's totally fine. Now on the next one, we're going to evaluate at 2. However, g is coming first this time. So the order does matter. So at 2, we go up, and we're at +2. And then f is down here at -2. Now I want to be careful because f is -2. This is not going to be 0 because they're telling me to subtract. So that is 2 minus -2, which is just going to give me 4. Okay, so be careful with the order there. But we can, kind of figure out using the graph what we need to do there. So we'll take a look at these equations. So again, I'm going to color code these. We'll have f of x, g of x, and then h of x will be my green function. So they want f plus g of -1. And this one's pretty straightforward. You're just going to take f of x, and you're going to plug in -1. And then you're going to take g of x. Notice I kept these pretty simple. We've got enough work to do. We're not going to make these terribly complicated. Right? So those are my two problems right now. So I do 4 times -1, which is -4 minus 3. So it's -7. And then I do -1 plus 6. Plus 7. That's +6. And then they're telling me to add those two together. So I do 7 plus 6. And my answer is -1. Some of these are ending up the same. That is purely coincidental when I'm plugging those values in. So don't really read into that too much. Then we're doing f of g of -2. So once again, you take the function f. So that's 4 times x minus 3. And we plug in a -2. We evaluate that. That's -8 minus 3. So that'll be -11. And then g of x is -2 plus 7. Right, x plus 7, and that will give me 5. And then they're telling me to do f, which is -11, minus g, which is 5. So we're going to get more negative here, and that is -16. And then we'll just look at a multiplication one because we haven't really looked at a ton of multiplication ones. So we're doing f times g of 5, right? So that means you do 4 times 5 minus 3. So that's going to be 17. And then we have g, which is x, so x plus 7. And that is going to be 12. And now we're going to multiply 17 times 12. They want the product of that. And that number is going to be pretty big. So I'm going to go ahead and use the calculator just to be sure that I'm typing this in correctly. So I do 17 times 12, and I get 204. It's a pretty big number. But again, you're just evaluating each function and then performing the operation that they ask. Let's look at 18 because we haven't used h yet. So we want to be careful with h because with h, they're telling me to do 2x squared plus 5x. Right? So they asked me to plug in a -3 here. -3. I'm going to do this kind of in pieces. So if I follow the order of operations, I have to square that -3 first. So that's 2 times 9, which is 18, minus that 15. So that's just going to be 3. And then I go up to my f of x, which was 4 times x minus 3. And we plug in a -3, we're going to get pretty negative here, right? So we're going to get -12 minus 3, that's -15. And they want h, which was 3 over f, which was -15. Now here, this is going to remain a fraction, but we can simplify this to 1/5. So that's the way we're going to leave that one. All right, so we'll finish the rest of those questions in class. Thanks for watching the video.